Hi everyone. So welcome to part 3 for this slide deck. This is where we start to talk explicitly about the digestive system. So far we've talked about this idea of that atoms are the smallest unit of matter. You can put atoms together to create things called molecules. There's different types of atoms called elements, and when you put these elements together in different ways, this is how you create the different molecules. And then in biology, we talked about this thing called macromolecules. So very, very large molecules specifically in the food that we eat. So now that we know that when we eat food, these macromolecules are going into our body, we have to discuss how our body utilizes these macromolecules, what happens to them when we eat them, and what happens to the food that we eat. So we're going to be going through, like I said, the digestive system. And as a reminder, number one, the digestive system takes the food that we eat, it breaks it down, it takes the nutrients out of it so our body can utilize those nutrients, and then it comes out of our butt through some poop. So specifically for science, it's called coming out of the anus in the form of feces. So that would be the science words for butt and poop, anus and feces. As a reminder, as we go through this slide deck, you should also be working on your vocab notebook at the same time. So please feel free to pause, rewatch the video. You can also reference the slide deck in your own time. And we are going to get going. The other disclaimer I'm going to say is that I do think it's helpful for you guys to see my face on the screen. I know it's awesome to look at, right? For whatever reason, when I go into present mode, it's not also showing my face as I talk, so I'm going to leave it in this mode right here. This seems to be the best option at the moment, and I will try to fix it in the future. So, digestive system. Now, like I said, the point of the digestive system is to take the food that we eat, extract the nutrients out of the food, use it in our body, and then have it come out as feces, as solid waste. So in order for this to happen, we have to talk about the different parts of the body that the digestive system uses. So these are the different organs in this organ system. So we're going to start with the mouth, which hopefully everybody knows where that is. In the diagram, it's right here. Food is then going to move towards your pharynx. And again, I will be going over these in detail. This is just the overall chart. So you might notice it might be kind of like a graphic organizer to you. We have the organ and then we have the function over here. As I go through the slide deck, what you will see, and I'll show you an example right now, is basically I zoom in on each part of the chart for us to take a look specifically at each organ and what it does. So notice we have mouth and function of the mouth, and I'm starting up here, mouth, function of the mouth. The other thing to note is that, yes, these organs, they do go in order that the food passes through them. So again, it's set up in a way to help you follow along with what's happening once the food enters your body. So again, we start with mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestines, large intestines, colon, anus. And then there's 3 accessory organs that food does not pass through, but these organs do help with the digestive process. And that's going to be the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. So once again, food does not pass through these 3 organs. They are there and they do what we call secrete fluid or secrete substances into other organs that the food is actually passing through. One thing to note as well is that your digestive system is essentially one long tube that connects your mouth to your anus, and food just moves through that tube. Different stuff happens to it in different locations, but stuff just moves through that tube from mouth to anus, and it eventually comes out as, like I said, feces. So let's start with where the food enters your body, which is your mouth. Hopefully we all know this. When we eat, we put it in our mouths. But your mouth actually has a very specific function for food, and it's very important that we do start with the mouth. So in terms of digestion, there are 2 forms of digestion. We can have mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So mechanical digestion is physically pulling the food apart into smaller pieces. And that's what chewing does. So when we chew our food, we are physically breaking the food down into smaller pieces so that our body can eventually start to use the nutrients inside of it. That would be the mechanical digestion. For the chemical digestion, this is when we are using chemicals. In this case, we're using a chemical called enzymes. And these chemicals will go through different chemical reactions to, again, help break down the food. So in your saliva, you actually have a type of enzyme called amylase. Remember that ace at the end of a word means it is an enzyme. And amylase's specific job, because each enzyme has a very specific job, the job of amylase is to start to break down carbohydrates that you eat. So what we would do in the class if we were meeting together is I'd give you like a saltine cracker and ask you just to hold it in your mouth until it dissolves in your mouth. What you should notice because of your saliva is that the saltine cracker starts to get soggy and break down, but it also starts to taste very slightly sweet because it's made out of carbohydrates. So as your amylase starts to break down the cracker, so that would be more of a polysaccharide, a larger sugar molecule for that carbohydrate. As your amylase starts to break down that cracker, it breaks down that polysaccharide into the monosaccharide glucose, and that's why it does start to taste just ever so slightly sweet if you just let it sit in your mouth because it's going through chemical digestion. So, like I said, mouth, very important job. This is where digestion starts. We have both mechanical digestion through chewing and chemical digestion with the saliva. So that's very important to chew your food into smaller pieces because it helps it digest better. All right, next up is a location called the pharynx, which is essentially just the back of your throat. So if we look at this picture right here, someone's mouth is wide open, we're zooming in. This area right here where my mouse is, that would be your pharynx, the very back of the throat. And this is just a passageway for food because when we swallow, it has to go down our throat and into some other tubes. So that's what the pharynx is. Now, a little bit more important would be the esophagus. So the esophagus is a tube that connects your pharynx to the stomach. So essentially, when you swallow food, you have chewed it in your mouth, your saliva has started to break it down, you swallow the food, it passes through your pharynx, the back of your throat, and then it moves down this tube right here, your esophagus, so it can make its way to your stomach. Now, the esophagus is actually muscle tissue. So it is smooth muscle tissue, which means it has the ability to contract. And so it will help food move down that tube. The esophagus will help food move down towards your stomach by contracting in a way that we call peristalsis. Now, peristalsis is just a type of muscle contraction. If you think about like squeezing a tube of toothpaste from the bottom, you start at the bottom, you work your way up, the toothpaste comes out the top. That's what peristalsis does when you swallow. And so this is why you can stand on your head. You can do like a headstand and still swallow food and it will still go into your stomach instead of coming back up your mouth. So it's not just gravity moving the food from your mouth down into your stomach, but the esophagus has these muscular contractions that help to squeeze the food down into your stomach as well. All right, so once it's in your stomach, this is where a bunch of stuff happens. So again, in the stomach, there is mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So your stomach, again, is actually a type of muscle tissue, so it has the ability to contract. And so mechanically, it will contract and squish around the food that you eat. And this, again, will help to break down food physically. But you also have chemical digestion, and that is from stomach acid and other enzymes. So if you've ever like thrown up or had a really bad burp and you've had that acid come up your throat, that's actually the acid from your stomach. It's hydrochloric acid, which has a pH of 2. So it is a very, very strong acid. It can actually cause metal to rust. So like I said, very strong acid. This is why it burns if you ever throw up or if you get heartburn and that stomach acid comes up your esophagus into your pharynx, your throat. But yeah, so that's how the stomach starts to help to break down food. So specifically, we already talked about carbohydrates being broken down in your mouth through the enzyme amylase. But your stomach has enzymes in it as well that help to break down carbohydrates and fats or lipids. They are not digested, but they do start to break down just a little bit. Now, keep in mind, I have not mentioned protein yet. So we have not started to break down protein except for the chewing process, except for that mechanical digestion. You'll also notice there are different layers of the stomach here, and they do have different things. So I mentioned the stomach acid. Basically, your stomach lining has mucus all around the inside of it, and it has to constantly generate that mucus. Otherwise, the acid will eat through the stomach, and that's what we call an ulcer. So if you've ever had an ulcer or know someone who's had that before, basically the stomach acid was able to eat through the lining of the stomach and create just a tiny hole. So stomach acid leaks out, and it's very, very painful. Also note that the esophagus is right here, so food is coming down. This is your stomach right here, and then it's going to exit down this way right here into what we call the duodenum. It can be pronounced duodenum or duodenum. Both are correct. Now, keep in mind that the duodenum is the beginning of the small intestines. It is like the first 6 inches of the small intestines. So after about 4 to 5 hours of food sitting in the stomach, being digested chemically with the stomach acid and enzymes and mechanically through stomach contraction, the food does pass into the duodenum. The last thing I want to note about the stomach is when you are feeling hungry and your stomach growls, that's actually from your stomach trying to contract around food that's not there. And so it's making those sounds in your stomach, which is kind of cool. The other thing to note is a lot of people think their stomach is like down kind of near their belly button. Your stomach is actually, let me do it so you can see. So belly button, like down here, your stomach is actually up in this area right here. So just, again, something to keep in mind. I know when we feel full, we feel that full feeling kind of like in our lower part of the stomach, which is weird, but our stomach is actually a little bit higher up. All right, so so before we get to the duodenum and the small intestines, like I said, there are 3 organs that are part of this organ system that food does not pass through. So the pancreas is one of those organs, and in the picture right here, the stomach is right here. So like I said, it's up near your rib cage. And then the pancreas is this orange organ right here, right next to the stomach. In this picture right here, this is the pancreas and this is the stomach. So just so you can see the physical location of it. So the pancreas does what we call, it secretes into the duodenum. So basically from the pancreas, there's a little tube that connects the pancreas to the duodenum. So you can see it right here, this like little green tube. Here's your duodenum, here's your pancreas. There's a little tunnel connecting the two. So the pancreas will send specific fluids, or it will secrete specific fluids to help to break down food and really get that digestive process going. So it secretes enzymes that specifically break down fats and carbohydrates, and it also secretes a buffer to neutralize the stomach acid. So like I said, the stomach acid is a pH of 2. This buffer will bring the pH up to that neutral pH of a 7-ish. That way, the stomach acid isn't also eating through your duodenum and your small intestines. The liver we will come back to again when we do the circulatory system, but basically it produces enzymes that help to detoxify the blood. This is important because your blood is what absorbs the nutrients after it leaves the digestive system. So the digestive system is connected to the circulatory system because the blood is what actually like transports the nutrients to the cells in your body. So it's important to have the liver to detoxify anything that you're eating that you shouldn't be eating. Last but not least is this organ called a gallbladder. So, what I forgot to mention, liver is right here, right under your ribs as well, right next to the stomach. And then you'll notice the gallbladder here. It's very tiny. And so again, stomach is right here. It's right next to the stomach, and it does have a little tube or a little tunnel connecting the gallbladder to the duodenum. And the gallbladder secretes what we call bile. And this liquid is meant to help break down fats specifically in the duodenum. All right, so now let's actually talk about the small intestines. Like I said, the duodenum is the first 6 inches of the small intestine, so there is a lot of digestion taking place in those 6 inches right there because of the enzymes and the bile secreted to that area. Now, as we work our way into the small intestine, so again, here is our stomach. This area right here would be considered the duodenum, and then the rest of this coiled beauty is your small intestines. The small intestines are called the small intestines because they are a small tube. They are very long, but their width is small. And so basically inside of you, you're going to have about 18 to 23 feet of small intestines coiled up into your lower stomach area. And this is where chemical digestion takes place and also nutrient absorption. So like I said, the food that we eat has nutrients in it. It has protein, it has lipids, it has carbohydrates, it has vitamins, it has minerals. So once we're able to really break down the food to those macromolecules, that is when we can start to absorb those nutrients. So that takes place in these 18 to 23 feet of the small intestines. And there are going to be blood vessels, specifically capillaries, surrounding all over the small intestines. And that's how the nutrients are able to be easily transported from the digestive system into the circulatory system. So the circulatory system can then go and transport those nutrients to all of your cells. Now this thing here, the villi, these are inside of the small intestine. So this is a physical structure. So if you zoom in on the small intestines on the inside, we have these they're called finger-like protrusions. So these little Humpty Dumps right here, these are the villi. And so this picture right here is showing you the inside of intestines. And that peach fuzz that you see, those are the villi. The greenness of it, that would be pre-feces or pre-poop. It's in the process of being digested. It's not ready to come out as poop just yet. But this is the starting point of your poop. Anyway, we're talking about villi. So we're looking at peach fuzz. These are what the structures look like closer up. And like I said, notice that these blood vessels are running through all of the villi. So what the villi do, which is crucial for nutrient absorption, is it creates more surface area inside the small intestines. So besides having 18 to 23 feet of small intestines coiled up inside of us, along each wall are these tiny protrusions to add more space for nutrient absorption. And then you'll notice, like I said, the blood vessels are right in there in that extra space to more easily transport the nutrients from the digestive system to the circulatory system. So this is a great example of form and function. The form would be the physical villi here that we see. The function being it creates more surface area so we can better absorb the nutrients that we eat. All right, so this is a video I would like to show everyone. I'm gonna have to go into present mode so you won't have to look at this face too much longer. But what I'd like to show you is a quick clip from a video of, this is from a type of surgery meant for very, very obese people. It's meant to help them lose weight. I'm not saying if this is right or wrong by any means, but it's basically going to give us a really great view of what the digestive system looks like on the inside. So specifically the stomach, the small intestines, those blood vessels, and circulating the small intestines, and you'll also see some body fat around the organs as well. What you're seeing here, this like yellow fluffy stuff, this is all fat that they're poking around at. This is the person's fat. Like I said, this surgery is meant for very, very obese people. It is called gastric bypass surgery. So essentially the point of this surgery is to cut out a portion of the person's stomach to make it smaller so they physically can't eat as much food. And then they also reroute some of the small intestines and basically get rid of it so the person can't absorb as many nutrients from the food that they eat. So this is just, like I said, a way to help induce weight loss. If it's right or wrong, that's up to you. But also what you're seeing, they just cut, stapled, and cauterized part of the small intestines here because, like I said, they have to reroute the entire digestive tract to make this happen. So this pink stuff right here, these are all someone's intestines that they're going through. This yellow stuff over here and over here, this is all the person's fat that they've stored on their body. So what you're seeing here is they are actually cutting into part of the small intestines because this hole is where they're going to link it up with the stomach so food can more easily pass through there. So what you're seeing here again is they're going in, creating those holes, and now they're able to sew this hole to the smaller stomach. And by doing that, like I said, they create a physically smaller stomach and there's less space and room for nutrient absorption. So people just can't get as much out of the food that they're eating. They're also eating less food. And so it helps them lose weight. Again, you can decide if this is right or wrong to do. But hopefully you are enjoying seeing what it actually looks like on the inside of you or the inside of a person. So at this point, they're kind of just sewing the person back up. This is obviously a sped up surgery. It takes at least a couple hours to go through the whole thing. But it should have given you a good idea of what this actually looks like on the inside. Cool. I hope y'all enjoyed that one. All right, let us move on to the large intestines. So large intestines are called large because they have a wider tube or a larger diameter. Small intestines are small, large intestines large. And the large intestines, they are about 5 to 6 feet long. So most people are within that range for height. Most people are 5 feet to 6 feet tall. So your large intestines are pretty much as long as you are tall, which is kind of crazy still. They connect the small intestines to the anus. So remember, the anus is where the poop physically comes out of your body. No digestion actually takes place here, but this is where water absorption happens. So remember, your poop is supposed to be a solid waste. I know sometimes we have diarrhea and it's liquid waste. I'm going to ask you that question in a second. But we are creating solid waste. So the large intestine's job is to absorb the extra water from your feces before it comes out to make it solid instead of liquid. Now, what you're looking at here is someone's colon lining, which is a part of the large intestines. Some people do develop colon cancer, and they have procedures called a colonoscopy to go in and look around and make sure that everything looks normal up inside someone's colon. They're not developing a tumor for cancer. And I will show you a video of someone having what's called a polyp removed from their colon. So it's sort of like a precancerous tumor is being removed from the person's colon. That's on the next slide. But before we get there, I did mention that, we can have solid poop or we can have liquid poop, aka diarrhea. The idea is if you have diarrhea for whatever reason, your large intestines are not doing their job. They're not absorbing that extra water from your food. It is what it is. It happens for different reasons. It's happened to all of us, but that's where diarrhea comes from. And like I did mention, our solid poop, the scientific word for it is feces. So that's what's down here. So like I said, I do have another video to show you. This is what's called a polypectomy. So they're removing a polyp. Let me get into present mode again. They are going to be removing this polyp right here, that precancerous tumor. It's not supposed to be here. So what you're seeing here is someone's colon. So this is like right before where the poop comes out. And yeah, so this again will give you a good visual of what it looks like inside of you, but also how they get rid of these polyp things. All right, so like I said, we are inside someone's colon right now. This is the polyp that needs to be removed. They're going to come in there with like a loop looking instrument, and it's going to both cut and cauterize the removal of that polyp. What they've also done is they've injected, or no, they haven't injected. They're using a specific light to locate the polyp, and what they showed you is there's a different pattern on the polyp compared to the rest of the colon, and that just shows the abnormal cell growth of the polyp itself. Yep, so we're focusing in. Polyp is right here. Oh, so here's that tube. So that little tube there is going to eventually suction the polyp up. And there it is. Come on. Come on. Yep, so what you're seeing is that they're poking around just to see where the polyp ends and where the colon begins. They have to make sure they remove the entire polyp. And part of that is to remove like a little bit of the colon, but they want to make sure, like I said, that they get the entire thing. So there's that loop I was talking about. They put it around the polyp. It's going to send an electrical impulse or a shock through it, which is going to cut and cauterize where they're cutting the polyp from. There we go. And now it got sucked up the tube, and that is where the polyp once was, like I said, cut and cauterized, and then they just wash it off. So again, keep in mind that in order to do that procedure, they had to stick a camera as well as that like tube tool up someone's anus into their colon. And I will let you think about that one on your own time. But the last part here, because at this point, if we're in the colon, solid waste is going to come out of the anus. But as far as how long it takes food to go from mouth to anus, depending on the person, depending on the food that they're eating, it's anywhere from 24 to 72 hours or 1 to 3 days. So keep in mind that if you are the type of person to eat food and then immediately have to go number 2 in the restroom, it's not the same food that you're eating. It's actually food from the previous day or the previous 2 or 3 days that's coming out of you. So like I said, one long tube, mouth to anus, you put more in the top, some has to come out the bottom. So that would be the digestive system. Like I mentioned, please make sure you are going through your vocab notebook and filling out all the vocab words. Also, as a reminder, we created a chart for all the different organs in this organ system, in the digestive system, and each slide had the individual organ and function for you to have this overall chart if you would like it. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of the digestive system. I always think it's a fun one. And yes, make sure you are filling in your vocab notebook.